Gibran, considered by many literary voices a true lyrical genius. He was born in Lebanon in 1883, and then he moved to New York in 1912, where he led a life dedicated to painting and literature. He died in the year of 1931. Gibran's view of Jesus took the shape of his beautiful writing titled Jesus, Son of Man, which was published in 1928, 2 years before his death in 1931. Some critics considered this book to be so inspired that it was even better than his famous book, The Prophet. Gibran makes full proof of his wonderful sensitivity when giving life to the voices of those who knew Jesus, those who were close to him, but also those who knew only partially of him, and some who did not know him at all. Gibran let them speak in their own words about their feelings, their experiences, and memories of Jesus. He thus draws a very convincing portrait of Christ, of a rather intimate nature. And what transpires through his writing is his great affection and admiration towards Christ, his teachings, and his sacrifice for humanity. And now, dear community, some of the voices in this book will now speak to you about Jesus, Son of Man. Please hold all applause until the end of our entire presentation, and we will begin with a beautiful song, The Birthday of a King.
Alleluia, how the angels sang. Alleluia, how it rang, and the sky was bright with a holy light. 'Twas the birthday of a king. 'Twas a humble birthplace, but oh, how much God gave to us that day. From the manger bed, what a path has led, what a perfect holy way. Alleluia, how the angels sang. Alleluia, how it rang, and the sky was bright with a holy light. 'Twas the birthday of a king.
Anna, Mother of Mary, on the birth of Jesus.
Jesus, the son of my daughter, was born here in Nazareth in the month of January. And the night that Jesus was born, we were visited by men from the east. They were Persians who came to Esdraelon with the caravans of the Midianites on their way to Egypt. And because they did not find rooms at the inn, they sought shelter in our house. And I welcomed them. And I said, my daughter has given birth to a son this night. Surely you will forgive me if I do not serve you as it behooves a hostess. Then they thanked me for giving them shelter, and after they had supped, they said to me, we would see the newborn. Now the Son of Mary was beautiful to behold, and she too was comely. And when the Persians beheld Mary and held her babe, they took gold and silver from their bags and myrrh and frankincense and laid them at the feet of the child. Then they fell down and prayed in a strange tongue, which we did not understand. And when I led them to the bedchamber prepared for them, they walked as if they were in awe at what they'd seen. When morning was come, they left us and followed the road to Egypt. But at parting, they spoke to me and said, "The child is not but a day old, yet we have seen the light of our God in his eyes, and the smile of our God upon his mouth. We bid you protect him, that he may protect you all." And so saying, they mounted their camels, and we saw them no more. Now, Mary seemed not so much joyous in her firstborn as full of wonder and surprise. She would look upon her babe and then turn her face to the window and gaze far away into the sky as if she saw visions. And there were valleys between her heart and mine. And the child grew in body and spirit, and he was different from other children. He was aloof and hard to govern, and I could not lay my hand upon him. But he was beloved by everyone in Nazareth, and in my heart I knew why. Oftentimes he would take away our food to give to the passerby, and he would give other children the sweet meat I had given him before he had tasted it with his own mouth. He would climb the trees of my orchard to get the fruits, but never to eat for himself. And he would race with the other boys, and sometimes, because he was swifter of foot, he would delay so they might pass the stake ere he should reach it. And sometimes when I led him to his bed, he would say, "Tell my mother and the others that only my body will sleep. My mind will be with them till their mind come to my morning." And many other wondrous words he said when he was a boy, but I am too old to remember.
Philemon, a Greek apothecary, on Jesus, the master physician.
The Nazarene was the master physician of his people. No other man knew so much of our bodies and of their elements and properties. He made whole those who were afflicted with disease unknown to the Greeks or the Egyptians. They say he even called the dead back to life. And whether this is true or not true, it declares his power, for only to him who has wrought great things is the greatest ever attributed. They say also that Jesus visited India and the country between the two rivers, and that there the priests revealed to him the knowledge of all that is hidden in the recesses of our flesh. Yet that knowledge may have been given to him directly by the gods and not through the priests, for that which has remained unknown to all men for an eon may be disclosed to one man in but a moment. Many doors were opened to the Tyrians and the Thebians, and to this man also certain sealed doors were opened. He entered the temple of the soul, which is the body, and he beheld the evil spirits that conspire against our sinews, and also the good spirits that spin the threads thereof. Methinks it was by the power of opposition and resistance that he healed the sick, but in a manner unknown to our philosophers. He astonished fever with his snow-like touch, and it retreated. He surprised the hardened limbs with his own calm, and they yielded to him and were at peace. He knew the ebbing sap within the furrowed bark, but how he reached the sap with his fingers, I do not know. He knew the sound steel underneath the rust, but how he freed the sword and made it shine, no man can tell. Sometimes it seems to me that he heard the murmuring pain of all things that grow in the sun, and that he lifted them up and supported them, but not only by his own knowledge, but also by disclosing to them their own power to rise and become whole.
Young Mary Magdalene, on meeting Jesus for the first time.
It was in the month of June when I saw him for the first time. He was walking in the wheat field when I passed by with my handmaidens, and he was alone. The rhythm of his steps was different from other men's, and the movement of his body was like naught I had seen before. And even now, I don't know whether he walked fast or slow. My handmaidens pointed their fingers at him and spoke in shy whispers to one another, and I stayed my step for a moment, and I raised my hand to him to hail him. But he did not turn. He did not look at me, and I hated him. I was swept back into myself, and I was as cold as if I had been laying in a snowdrift, and I shivered. That night I beheld him in my dreaming, and they told me afterward that I had screamed in my sleep and was restless upon my bed. It was in the month of August that I saw him again. Through my window, he was sitting in the shadow of the cypress tree in my yard, and he was as still as if he was carved from stone. My slave came to me and said, "That man, he's here again. He is sitting in your garden." And I gazed at him, and my soul quivered. For he was beautiful. His body was single, and each part seemed to love every other part. I left my house and walked towards him. Was it my aloneness, or was it his fragrance that drew me to him? Even now I do not know. I walked to him with my scented garments and my golden sandals, the sandals the Roman captain had given me. And when I reached him, I said, "Good morrow to you." And he said, "Good morrow to you, Miriam." And he looked at me, and his night eyes saw me as no man had ever seen me. And suddenly I was as if naked, and I was shy. Yet he had only said, "Good morrow." When I said to him, "Will you not come to my house?" And he said, "Am I not already in your house?" I did not know what he meant then, but I do now. I said, "Will you not have wine and bread with me?" And he said, "Yes, Miriam, but not now." "Not now," he said. And the voice of the sea was in those two words, and the voice of the wind and the trees. And when he said them, life spoke to death. For mind you, my friend, I was dead. I was a woman who had divorced herself and was living apart, which you now see. I belonged to all men and to none. They called me harlot and a woman possessed of 7 devils. I was cursed and I was envied. But when his dawn eyes looked into my eyes, all the stars of my night faded away, and I became Miriam, only Miriam, a woman lost to the earth she had known and finding herself in new places. And now again I said to him, "Come into my house and share bread and wine with me." And he said, "Why do you bid me to be your guest?" And I said, "I beg you, come into my house." And it was all that was earth of me, and all that was sky of me calling to him. Then he looked at me, and the noontide of his eyes was upon me, and he said, "You have many lovers, and yet I alone love you for yourself. Other men see a beauty in you that shall fade away sooner than their own years. But I see in you a beauty that shall not fade away. I alone see the unseen in you." Then he said in a low voice, "Go away now. If this cypress tree is yours, and you would not have me sit in the shadow, I will walk my way." Then he stood up, looked at me, even as the seasons might look down upon the field, and he smiled, and he said again, "All men love you for themselves. I love you for yourself." And then he walked away. But no other man ever walked the way he walked. Was it a breath born in my garden that moved to the east? Or was it a storm that would shake all things to their foundations? I knew not, but on that day, the sunset of his eyes slew the dragon in me, and I became a woman. I became Miriam, Miriam of Midel.
O come, Emmanuel.
O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to you, O Israel. O come, thou dayspring, come and cheer our spirits while your advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and put death's dark shadows to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to you, O Israel.
As Rachel on his wisdom and as a man.
I often wonder whether Jesus was a man of flesh and blood like ourselves, or a thought without a body in the mind, or an idea that visits the vision of man. Often it seems to me that he was but a dream, dreamed by the countless men and women at the same time in a sleep deeper than sleep, and a dawn more serene than all dawns. And it seems that in relating the dream, the one to the other, we began to deem it a reality that had indeed come to pass, and in giving it body of our fancy and our voice of our longing, we made it a substance of our own substance. But in truth, he was not a dream. We knew him for 3 years. We beheld him with our open eyes at the high tide of noon. We touched his hands. We followed him from one place to another. We heard his discourses, and we witnessed his deeds. Think you that we were a thought seeking after more thought, or a dream in the realm of dreams? Great events often seem alien to our daily lives, though their nature may be rooted in our own nature. But though they appear sudden in their coming and sudden in their passing, their true span is for years and for generations. Jesus of Nazareth was himself the great event. That man whose father and mother and brothers we know was himself a miracle wrought in Judea. Yea, all his own miracles were placed at his feet. Would rise to the height of his ankles, and all the rivers of all the years shall not carry away our remembrance of him. He was a mountain burning in the night, yet he was a soft glow behind the hills. He was a tempest in the sky, yet he was a murmur in the midst of daybreak. He was a torrent pouring from the heights to the plains to destroy all the things in its path, and he was like the laughter of children. Every year I had waited for the spring to visit this valley. I had waited for the lilies and the cyclamen, and then every year my soul had been saddened within me. Forever I longed to rejoice with the spring, yet I just could not. But when Jesus came to my seasons, he was indeed a spring, and in him was the promise of all the years to come. He filled my heart with joy, and like the violets I grew, a shy thing, but in the light of his coming. And now the changing of the seasons of the world, not yet ours, shall not erase his loveliness from this our world. Nay, Jesus was not a phantom, nor a conception of the poets. He was a man like yourself and myself, but only to sight and touch and hearing. In all other ways, he was not like us. He was a man of joy, and it was upon the path of joy that he met the sorrows of all men. And it was from the high roofs of his sorrows that he beheld the joy of all men. His visions that we did not see. He heard voices that we did not hear. And he spoke as if to invisible multitudes. And oftentimes he spoke through us to races yet unborn. And Jesus was often alone. He was among us, yet not one with us. He was upon the earth, yet his day was of the sky. And only in our aloneness may we visit the land of his aloneness. He loved us with tender love. His heart was a winepress you and I could approach with the cup and drink therefrom. One thing I didn't used to understand in Jesus, he would make merry with his listeners. He would tell jests and play upon words and laugh with all the fullness of his heart, even when there were distances in his eyes and sadness in his voice. But I understand now. I often think of the earth as a woman heavy with her first child. When Jesus was born, he was the first child. And when he died, he was the first man to die. For did not it appear to you that the earth was stilled on that dark Friday, and the heavens were at war with the heavens? And yet you feel not when his face disappeared from our sight, as if we were naught but memories in the mist.
Cleopas on the law and the prophets.
When Jesus spoke, the whole world hushed to listen. But his words were not for our ears. He spoke to the very elements of which God made this earth. He spoke to the sea, our vast mother who gave us birth. And he spoke to the mountain, our elder brother, whose summit is a promise. And he spoke to the angels beyond the sea and beyond the mountain, to whom we entrusted our dreams. Ere the clay in us was made hard in the sun. And still his speech slumbers in our breasts. It's like a love song half forgotten. And sometimes it burns itself through to our memory. His speech was simple and joyous, and the sound of his voice was like cool water in a land of drought. Once, he raised his hand high in the sky and said, "The prophets of old have spoken to you, and your ears are filled with their speech. But I say unto you, empty your ears of what you have heard." And these words of Jesus, "But I say unto you," were not uttered by a man of our race nor of our world, but by a whole army of seraphim marching across the sky. Again, and yet again, he would quote the law and the prophets, and he would say, "But I say unto you." Oh, what burning words, what waves of seas unknown to the shores of our mind. But I say unto you, what stars seeking the darkness of our soul, and what sleepless souls awaiting the dawn. To tell the speech of Jesus, one must needs have his speech, or at least the echo thereof. I have neither the speech nor the echo. I beg you to forgive me, please, for beginning a story that I cannot end. But the end is not yet upon my lips. It is as a love song in the wind.
Now, Pilate's wife speaks to a Roman lady of Jesus of love and strength.
I was walking with my maidens in the groves outside of Jerusalem when I saw him with a few men and women sitting about him, and he was speaking in a language I didn't quite understand. But one need not a language to perceive a pillar of light or a mountain of crystal. The heart knows what the tongue may never utter or the ears may never hear. And he was speaking of love and strength. I know he spoke of love because there was a melody in his voice. I know he spoke of strength because there were armies in his gestures, yet he was tender. Though even my husband could not have spoken with such authority. As I was passing by, he stopped speaking for a moment and looked kindly upon me, and I was humbled. And I knew in my soul that I had passed by a God. Later that day, his image would visit my privacy when I would not be visited by man nor woman. And his eyes searched my soul when my own eyes were closed. His voice still governs the stillness of my nights. And I hold fast forevermore that there is peace in my pain and freedom in my tears. Beloved friend, you did not see this man, and you will never see him. He has gone beyond our senses, but of all men, he is now the nearest to me.
Mary Magdalene, 30 years later.
Once again, I say that with death, Jesus conquered death and rose from the grave a spirit and a power. And he walked in our solitude and visited the gardens of our passion. He lies not there in that cleft rock behind that stone. We who loved him beheld him with these our eyes, which he made to see. And we touched him with these our hands, which he taught to reach forth. I know you who believe not in him. I was one of you, and you are many, but your number shall be diminished. Must you break your harp and lyre to find the music therein? Or must you fell a tree ere you can believe it bears fruit? You hate Jesus because someone from the North Country said he was the Son of God. But you hate one another because each of you deems himself too great to be the brother of the next man. You hate him because someone said he was born of a virgin and not of man's seed. But you know not the mothers who go to the tomb in virginity, nor the men who go down to the grave choked with their own thirst. You know not that the earth was given in marriage to the Son, and that earth it is who sends us forth to the mountain and the desert. There is a gulf that yawns between those who love him and those who hate him, between those who believe and those who do not believe. But when the years have bridged that gulf, you shall know that he who lived in us is deathless, that he was the Son of God, even as we are the children of God, that he was born of a virgin, even as we are born of the husbandless earth. It is passing strange that the earth gives not to the unbelievers the roots that would suck at her breast, nor the wings wherewith to fly high and drink and be filled with the dews of her space. But I know what I know, and it is enough.
He shall feed his flock.
He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall feed and gather the lambs with his arm, with his arm.